Yeah, let's see Dal Yud Gimel. It says here about the ethnon. Basically, sorry we have to talk about these things, but this is part of life. Just like we mentioned 2 weeks ago, having a dog is a thing among Jews. Unfortunately, there's always an educator who says, "Oh, you can't have a pet dog. We'll kick your daughter out of the Beis Yaakov if you catch her walking her dog again." Well, ridiculous thing. But just like unfortunately prostitution has existed, there's always a minority who engage in it, and so too having a dog. It says a person buys a dog from someone else. What do you give him as a dog? Trade a sheep. I have a young sheep, and this other guy has a dog. I know someone just got a dog this week. So sometimes nowadays people just want to give away dogs. You have the ASPCA's and things like that. There's too many, so you could just adopt the dog. So that's fine. But in the olden days, you had to buy one, and you bought one. You traded it, a sheep for a dog, so that you have a nice dog to guard your sheep, whatever else you need your dog for. But you use that. That's called the mechir kelev. Ba'aleh w'non lathan la. This man used the services of the harlot. As we saw, that was also a question. What is the definition? Traditional definition of zona, like prostitute, or is it mean the halachic definition that we see in Issurei bio of the Rambam? Machlokas. We saw it last week, so you can see the view about that. He only paid her with this sheep, or whatever it is, the animal that's intended for that she's going to make into sacrifice sometime later, even after a few years. Delayed payment. Hareza ethnon. So that's still an ethnon, despite the delay, which means that this sheep cannot be brought as sacrifice to the temple if it's a sheep. Ba'med dvarim amarim b'choya she'amar la b'taleh zeh she'ena tzricha mishicha o b'Yisraelit she'ya taleh b'chatzirav amar la im lo etin lach ma'oth yom ploni harei shalach. This is on condition. What? That the zonon question is a Gentilis, and he said, "This tleh here, I'm going to give you this sheep, this kid goat, whatever it is, and her acquisition is made entirely by him just saying, here's your goat,' and she doesn't actually have to pull the goat. Normally in Nezikin, we say that acquisitions affected by Jews have to be affected by some act, right? So for a Jewish person acquiring an animal, it's mishicha. Usually there's maybe, let's say, a leash or something. The reins tied around the animal, or he pulls the animal somehow. The animal has a collar. So in order to make the acquisition on the sheep, he pulls the sheep along. That's a mishicha. But the Gentiles woman has no such standard of acquisition. Him just saying, here's your sheep right in front of you, that's already acquisition. Or if it's a Jewish woman who technically would have to pull the sheep along, if it's already sitting in her yard, let's say chatzer is a halachic term, not lav dafka yard, could just be her house or some other domain that's hers, right? There's the halachas, you can find this in Bava Mitzvah and other places. So kinyan chatzer it's called. So kinyan chatzer works. Instead of me having to pick up the object, because it landed in my yard, I can go and say, my field is acquiring it for me. Kinyan. Yeah, even before someone else can get his hands on it. So kinyan chatzer works. Aval imam arla. If he told her, he ba'ali lo betaleh stam. He said, let's I'll pay with this sheep. And he just said stam, a sheep, eventually. Eventually he paid her with the sheep, and there's no formal act of acquisition at the time, or she wasn't a Gentilis, then this sheep is technically not an ethnon. Okay? The Yehuda and Tamar case, that wouldn't have been an ethnon if she was Jewish, and he was Jewish, because there's no terminology of Jewish before the Matan Torah, but assuming that case, then it would have been because he sent the sheep sometime later with his Adulamite friend. So that wouldn't have been this case. So it depends on if she acquired it or not. Ein asur mishum ethnon. Okay. Umchir kelev ela gufan. That which is forbidden as an ethnon or a mechir kelev is only the actual animal itself, not let's say the money. Therefore, these disqualifying categories are only on something that could have been a sacrifice on the altar. Could go in behema to a raw, like a kosher animal for sacrifice, sheep, goats, cows. V'torin uvnei or turtles or pigeon doves. V'yayin shemen usoleth, or wine, olive oil. Shemen stam is usually olive oil. Okay, there's no such oil brought to the temple besides olive oil. And soleth. What is soleth? Soleth, we say, is fine flour, but it's not the finest flour. Anybody here grind wheat? We're going to have to see this when we talk about baking the korbanot. So let's say you have wheat, okay? Anybody know how couscous is made, or soleth, or semolina, farina, the various things? The flour that you buy in the stores is ground very fine. It's dusty, right? So it's milled very finely. So you can make when you mix it with water, you almost can't detect the particles there. This is talking about something that's actually ground more coarsely. It's just the kernels of wheat broken up. They break up the kernels and they remove the brown stuff on the outside, like it's the not the endosperm, I think it's called. The endosperm is the inner part, of the grain, the white stuff. It's mostly made out of starch, and it comes apart in these big clumps. And they specifically remove. We're going to see this later. The very fine powdery stuff, which comes out, they call it the avak, the kemach stuff. That's actually unqualified for soleh. When they prepare the menachos, the meal offerings in the temple, they have to use the stuff that's called soleh. Now, they actually sell this here in stores. Have you seen it? The older women make cakes out of it. It makes a type of cake that you could actually taste. It's more grainy than, let's say, using the Western style flour that we use to make dough, like pizza dough we just had. Right? So that's finely ground flour. You mix it with water, it's very smooth. And they even make the matzah out of that nowadays. What they used in the temple was something that's a lot more coarse ground. I think there's some pictures there we're going to get to. Okay, so that's what's referring to. Finely ground flour, even if, let's say, it's the kosherest stuff, it's taken from the prime wheat here in the land of Israel, and it's perfect for korbanos, it's from the right place, and it's kept pure and shmor mishas katzira, you should still not be using that for meal offerings in the temple. You're supposed to be using the stuff that's soleh. So if you paid her with money, he actually pays the prostitute with money, or in this case means coins, because they didn't have paper money back then. If he pays with coins, so those coins can be brought to the temple. The only thing that's forbidden as an ethnon zunah was an actual animal or one of these foodstuffs that could be brought on the altar. Let's say he paid her with wheat, stalks of wheat, a whole sheaf of wheat, or a few, a wheelbarrow full of sheaves of wheat from his field. That's what her payment was. And then she turns that into soleth. She makes it into, I think, the proper Hebrew English translation of soleth, by the way, into English is semolina. Okay? Semolina is not a type of wheat. Durum is the type of wheat they used to make noodles, and the semolina is the stuff they used to make the noodles. They grind it up a certain way. Okay. Anybody here make noodles ever from scratch? No. Okay. No one even knows how to make noodles anymore. Okay. Zaytim asato san shemen. She got olives from him and she squeezed them into oil. Anavim asat utan yain. He paid her in grapes and she squeezed them and made them into wine. Hare elu kshirim shekfar nishtanu. So these can be used as sacrifice in the temple, even though it's the same grapes. No, now it's wine. They've gone through a change. This is similar, not exactly in halacha, with regards to thievery. Person steals from another, he has to return that which he stole, unless he already did a shinui on it, in which case he has now acquired that which he stole. Doesn't mean God has now forgiven him for what he does. He still has to make restitution, but the restitution is now the value and more so of what he stole, and not that which he stole. Make sense? Okay, remember these halachas? Okay, good. Nathan la be'emath kodashim be'ethnana. He gave her an animal that's already supposed to be kachim as her payment, the hire of a harlot. So he gave her a korban pesach. He took the goat that he had in his yard that he's already registered as for korban pesach. It's already kodesh. Lo nes ralons beach. La'afilu minauto al piskov al chiagigoto be'ethnana. He has not disqualified this from the Mizbeach. And even if he said, you know what, your payment for your harlot services is going to be a membership on the Korban Pesach. You'll get to eat from this Korban Pesach with us. You'll have a share of the Korban Pesach. Boy, I tell you, some people, like someone asked before, like Chazal gave a decree against this. It said that if you a Gentilist woman carries the prohibition also of Anida and all sorts of other things. So it said, well, how's that going to stop him? If the Isser, the straight Isser is not going to stop him, telling him that, he'll also be contaminated, Isser Nida, he'll be contaminated for 7 days with Tumas Nida, that will stop him. That's a disincentive. Why is that less than? The answer is some people that's the way the Yitzhahar works. Case of the Gemara says they're willing to do the Isser Arayos, but the consequential Tuma is not something they're willing to deal with. That takes them away from doing their mitzvahs afterwards. So that will stop them. Okay? It's very strange how we incentivize and disincentivize ourselves. The Yitzhahar is the biggest trick, Sometimes, I don't know. I guess you're not supposed to say I have no Yitzhahar for non-kosher food. You're not supposed to say like, oh, that cheeseburger, that's disgusting. You're supposed to say like, what are you gonna? It's enticing, but but I don't want it. We don't have cheeseburgers around here, so I can't say I'm enticed by non-kosher food, but I'm really not. I'm not sitting around looking for non-kosher food, so I don't know what the Yetzer Hara feels like. But I would imagine that for many people, the non-kosher Yetzer Hara is such a trickster. Why? Because you could just take something that's kosher. Here in Israel, of course, you can find a kosher alternative to whatever you're looking for. What are you looking for that you need? I don't get it. But then again, I know my own Yetzer Haras, and that makes no sense. You know, there's a guy running around trying to find some woman in some foreign country. You know, he's hoping one day to go to some foreign country, he'll meet this strange woman. You don't have anything. That's what you got to go for, a fantasy of something so far away, and that's the Chazal described it. Yeah, some people are like that. That's how it works. That's what the Yetzer Hara tells them. They say that something that they don't know about, that's not in front of their face, that is not any better than what they have right in front of them. For some reason, that which is forbidden on the other side of the world, that has the pull. Very strange. Yes, that's a strange. Chazal entertain that, by the way, to learn Torah. Sometimes the Rebbe is stuck in Chutz La'aretz, or you can't find the yeshiva. But Chazal we're talking about when the land of Israel was on the decline, early Talmudic times, right? So that makes sense. The Byzantine era, you actually had to go to Bavel if you wanted to learn. Eventually, you couldn't learn Eretz Yisrael. They made it so difficult. But now that dispensation, of course, doesn't apply. Back to the Rambam. It says here, Lo nifsalu muktashim shekvar zacha bahen gavoa misha shuktashu. You cannot disqualify these korbanot, these animals, by giving it to the prostitute. Why? Because they only belong by God. If he gave her something that's not his, he paid her with his friend's sheep, basically stole a sheep from his friend. A man cannot prohibit that which is not his. It's not his. He can't cause a state of prohibition to they say go on. That's a yeshivishism. Okay, he cannot not engender in this case. What's the word here? He cannot cause a state of prohibition to not befall. Oh, come on! Someone give me the right word here. Proper English word here. Okay. Yeah, I forgot. The point is, a person cannot prohibit ritually that which, or cause a state of prohibition to take on.
The prohibited, and you're not allowed to prohibit the
prohibited. No, that what you're talking about. No, you're talking about a rabbi should not rule falsely. If he knows that something is permissible, he shouldn't tell people it's still prohibited, and vice versa. I'm saying I'm going to make this apple become prohibited. So I don't want to use the word prohibit in English because making this apple non-kosher is different than saying don't eat this apple. Okay? I'm not prohibiting this apple saying you just can't eat it because I say so. I'm saying I'm making this apple a form of prohibited substance or prohibited food. So in this case, you can't cause this animal to be disqualified from the altar, disqualified as sacrifice. State of prohibition to fall upon. No, I don't like that one. Why? Someone suggests state of prohibition to fall upon because I'm ending with the sentence. I don't say who are you going to do this for. You're ending with a preposition. For whom are you doing this? Okay, so I don't want to say that either. Yeah. We have to learn to talk English good. Sorry, an old joke. Yeah, yeah. We want to. No, it's serious. We should speak a proper English. We should know how to say this in another language. The point is, I cannot make this go into a state of prohibition. I cannot let this fall into a state of prohibition through my action because it does not belong to me. We saw this principle before. We discussed it last week. Let's say he gave her birds. He paid with pigeon doves and turtles. Okay, fall upon the sheep. Who fell upon the sheep? No, we're past that already. We'll when we write the translation, God willing, we'll check what Tauger translated, and we'll check what Korean's doing with this. When we write the translation, we'll make a note of that. Okay. Hold on a second. Let me just see. I don't know. Fall upon the sheep. I'm not going to go with that yet. We'll see when we translate it. Even though we gave them muktashim et non chalehem v'asurim, he says birds. If these birds have been donated as korbanot already, and he does pay her with these birds, so that would be chal alehem etnan. Now they are considered the hire of a harlot, and they would be forbidden. Uvdivrei kabbalah huzeh. This is a tradition halacha. Even though it makes, I don't see why you would make a distinction between animals, sheep, goats, and cows, and birds. This distinction exists. That's what the Rambam says. To which the Ravid says, read your Ravids, which you do not have. By the way, Achio, you have the Ravid there? You have a Rambam in front of you? There's a Rambam over there on that table, and there's two more over here. But you'll have to go to the bookshelf to get the Frankel edition if you want to read the Ravid. I'll read it here. Amar Abraham, Lo chen anu mikubalim. We don't have that. We don't have such a Kabbalah. Shalfoth imukdashin hein hariamru prat lindor. Okay, where he says in the in Psachim that these animals are also not part of the thing that a person could prohibit by giving to a prostitute. It's talking about animals of hulin. If you paid her with animals that were secular, that hadn't been korbanos already, then those animals become ethnan. What this teaches us is, even though birds have a much lower standard of mumin, like we saw, remember, birds don't have all those 70 whatever it is mumin that disqualify animals. Even though birds are not disqualified by mumin, they could be disqualified by being used to pay the prostitute. They can become the hire of a harlot if he does pay her with them, as we saw in the Mishnah in Tamura. So the Ravid disagrees with the Rambam's bottom line here. Korean says it better. Dath Rashi and the Ravid. Gambo both luchal Issurei ethnan al mukdashim elal hulin bilvad. The Issurei of ethnan only applies to birds that have not yet been sanctified for temple use. Once they're sanctified for temple use, just like an animal, even if a person does somehow use them to pay the prostitute, they do not become disqualified because they already belong to the temple. And a person cannot prohibit or cause a state of provision to fall upon that which is not his. So what's a Mechir Kelev? The next halacha. Oh, I should put this on the screen. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. Let's put this on here. You'll forgive me for the lateness. Any questions until this point? Well, we have a take a second. Sefer Avoda. We're in Hilchot Issurei Mizbeach. Continue. You guys finished the pizza? It's all done?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, my daughter's gonna be upset, but whatever. It's okay. You have to get the pizza. It's your pizza. Okay. Oh, we have someone else here. Okay. So here we're in the fourth parak. So we're at the end here. What's a Mechir Kelev? Mechir Kelev is what someone pays the other guy for the right to own the dog. Zeomer lechaviro, hey lecha tleze. Hey means here, take this. This is for you. That's a line from Joseph. Joseph said, hey lecha zera. Here's some seeds. Go plant. Tachat kelev zeh. In exchange for this dog, I need a guard dog. So please take this. You take the sheep. I'll take the dog. Let's say he actually trades the dog for many animals for whatever reason, 10 sheep, ofot, or and as many birds. So all these animals and birds would become prohibited to the altar because they've been exchanged for a dog. It's true that some have claimed, Jewish and non-Jewish, have said that in context, if non-zona is as it is, and Mechir Kelev is what a person would pay for a male prostitute. Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's not how the way we possible. Okay, what? This tradition. Okay. Yeah, there are such things. No, not Kabbalah. The Torah Shabbal Peh. Yes, things like that exist. There's called the Kadesh and the Kadeshah are mentioned in the Bible a few times. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It was, yeah, okay. So the
I didn't know that was going on back.
No, the Canaanim were very creative with these things. Yeah. Well, okay, it's very weird. They used to do other stuff. The Rambam writes about this. Rashi talks about this. Avram Avinu was born into a world where wherever he went, there were different avodah zaras. Where he lived in the land of the Chaldeans, in Shinar and Bavel, and even Far East and Kuta, they had all these strange gods. They had a god for everything. And then he came to Eretz Canaan, and in Eretz Canaan, they had all different gods for everything. And they had all different crazy forms of worship. And also human sacrifice every now and then. Molech wasn't, I'm more scandalized. Prostitution, I can understand why people would do that as part of their worship. They're combining their Yetzer Haros, their taivas, with and sanctifying it. That's why it's called Kadesh and Kadeshah. That makes sense. But the child sacrifice, that only exists in the Western world nowadays. So who's doing that? The abortion movement.
says that you're allowed to use abortion 40 days, right?
That the halacha says about that, like early term, it's not count. But we poskin that for Gentiles, abortion, once the woman is detectably pregnant after 40 days, and abortion is an act of murder in Gentile society. For Jews, it's a different standard, by the way, as we had a long shir about this. But for Gentiles in Gentile society, that gives abortion in a case where it's not a matter of life and death, or other halachic exceptions, or just a thing you do, that's murder. And that's explicit in the Torah and in the Talmud. So they've created this condition.
They got rid of it.
Well,
They
no, they just said that there's no right to it, but there are many states. There are many countries and many states where this is the thing that they do without any justification whatsoever. So that's a problem. I was just making jokes. I was saying it tongue in cheek. I was just saying that the human sacrifice existed in the ancient world. I'm less surprised that the Canaanites and others had sacred prostitution as part of their avodah zarah, because that's what people want to do. I think the other stuff is just crazy. And the Egyptians also. Abraham ended up in Egypt, where the Egyptians, of course, had many different gods. And they heard about, you cross the Mediterranean Sea, you get to the land of the Greeks and the islands, where they have also different gods for different things, right? Avraham Avinu was born into a world where the Egyptians were already a major world power at the time, the biggest world power. The Sumerian civilization had existed for a while. Canaanites were there. They were basically vassal Egyptians. The Hittites were a big deal back then. And the Greeks, of course, existed. The early Greeks. Yavam was born before Avraham Avinu by a few generations. So it's kind of crazy. So don't be surprised by what they're describing here.
And it seemed to continue on later on when the Spanish, when the Spanish landed in South America.
Yeah, they real avodah zarah going on there, and the Aztecs and the Incas and all that. Yeah, and human sacrifice, of course. But then again, it's not like the Catholic Spain and Catholic Italy. They had their own form of, let's say, human sacrifice. They used to what did they used to do? They used to castrate young boys. Why? Because they wanted to keep them as good singers, and they would impose celibacy on their clergy. And they have until today, we mentioned before, bullfighting. Bullfighting is an avodah zarah type of thing.
Really?
And every now and then, sometimes the guy gives his life. He gets killed by the bull, like we mentioned. These forms of avodah zarah and cruelty existed in Spain for hundreds of years.
Is it cruel to the bull, or is it cruel to the man?
It's cruel to the bull, and if the bull wins, it's cruel to the man.
Well, we care what happens to the guy. Someone's stupid enough to go in there and do it to the bull.
Because he's a human. And we do not want humans engaging in these, what's called Hilchot Aglim, this Rambam says tipshut, that involves avodah zarah and bloodshed. The problem is, when you have these foreign forms of culture, they usually find some sort of way, a synthesis of avodah zarah, shvichus damim, and gilui rayos. There's always a little bit of each involved. Some are more shvichus damim than the others. Some are more gilui rayos, and some are more avodah zarah. But they always have a little bit, mixed in. They come in different proportions. That's all. So you shouldn't be surprised that there should be avodah zarah. There should be a little gilui rayos mixed in with the avodah zarah. There's also shvichus damim mixed in. They all come in different, I guess, in different proportions depending on where and when you are.
Like how far do you go to police people? This is true story. There's a woman in Britain.
How far do you go to police
jumped
people?
Off this bridge. It
Okay.
was like over 100-something times.
Mhm.
And finally, she went to court. The judge ruled that she's not allowed within like 50 yards of any body of water to keep her away from the judge, because she tried to commit suicide. They had to rescue her.
Okay.
Like over 100 times, and it cost them like over $1 million or something. So like how far do you go to like police idiots? I mean, there's always gonna be people doing stupid stuff.
Okay. Well, you just got into a different topic. But let's not try to go too far off topic. The Torah commands that Jews and Gentiles alike live in societies where the big three averos, among other averos, are not tolerated. Period. Zero tolerance. Okay. So for shvichus damim, gilui rayos, and avodah zarah,
Translate, please.
shvichus damim is bloodshed.
Okay.
Gilui rayos is immorality, forbidden relations, and avodah zarah is idolatry. Those big three destroy society. Zero tolerance. Those who perpetrate acts in, let's say, a Gentile society are to be put to death if they're convicted by a court of law. And there's due process given to them, but they're to be put to death. There's no in between. There's no locking them up. There's no fines. There's just death. Murderers are to be put to death.
Yeah.
I was listening to some British people, actually commentators this week, talk about how, the European Union and other advanced civilizations have gotten rid of the death penalty, and they're wondering why crime is up. And then discovered the places where they actually have a little bit of the death penalty for the worst killers around, it actually improves society. Well, lo and behold, that which the Torah prescribes is actually put into practice, and it improves people. Who'd have known? But
earlier we was talking about.
No, so wait, hold on. But you asked about to prevent a woman from killing herself. So this woman's a danger to herself. A straitjacket, padded rooms and straitjackets for people who are like that. That's how you prevent them from killing themselves or from harming others.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier, governments get out of control and, they're spending and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you got governments that get out of control and they're just like executing people left and right, like Iran.
Yeah, that's a problem.
How do you reel these guys in? And we have a death penalty, but we're not going to let the government get out of control and just start executing everybody.
You get the government you deserve. The Iranians, they have it. Communism and the Stalinist dictatorship happened in Russia. It didn't happen in the United States at the time, right? The founding fathers of the United States said that which they're proposing, their mode of government, is only for people who are ready for it, people who are educated a certain way and of a certain culture. It cannot be imposed anywhere else in the world. Basically, they're saying only in the British colonies or in Britain itself is such an idea able to take hold. You cannot go to, let's say, first President Bush's mistake. You cannot go to Iraq and say, we will make it a little America. We're just going to go there, get rid of the regime, and it'll be a Western democracy. That doesn't work that way. And you can't expect the Gentiles to make a Jewish culture. Here in Israel, I'm less worried about my rights than I am. In America, you have to worry about your rights. Because if not, they're like we've seen too many times, Jews lose their rights to defend themselves and to speak. The second you lose freedom of speech, then they're going to, next thing you know, there's going to be a Warsaw Ghetto, right?
Right.
So Jews should watch out living in foreign lands. Here in Israel, it's less about rights. Here in Israel, we have to serve God. So even if the government is going to take away my right of free speech, I don't think as halacha I had a right to free speech. I shouldn't be uttering heresies. I shouldn't even have right of free thought according to the Rambam. So I'm not worried about my rights necessarily here in the land of Israel. I'm worried about, are we keeping the Torah, and is the government enforcing the Torah law? That's something else entirely, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I want. So here in the land of Israel, I'm not worried that the government is going to, like, the Jews are going to fall into, become like Iranians, let's say. Iranians act like Iranians. And some African third world place. What's the worst place in Africa? Uganda. A place like that. Not Kenya. Not, let's say, the place, the Ivory Coast.
It's actually Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah.
That's the bad.
So there's some African countries have, good systems and they're aligned with Israel, and some places are our enemies. The enemy countries, which are these brutal dictatorships, I'm not going to live there, and I don't want anything to do with them. And they can only form, a brutal dictatorship can only form because you have people like that culturally who are, I guess, ready for that. You will never have that happen in the land of Israel. Even in Ahab, the worst of our leaders were far and away better than anything could happen. Ahab kept the Torah, like Rabbi Victor Miller writes about this. Here's his book right in front of you. Ahab was an idolater who persecuted below. There's some, maybe put it back. There's some Rabbi Victor Miller books here. He had a regime that set up a temple to the Baal in his capital, and he persecuted the Nevi'im and executed a lot of them. But they still kept the Torah as a way of life. Isn't that strange? The Torah was their law. That is weird, but that's the way it goes. Menashe, king of Yehuda, was a great scholar of the Torah, and we can't judge him despite the fact that the Nevi'im describe how big an idolater he was. That's not going to happen among Jews, so I'm not worried about the Iranians. What am I to do with the Iranians? There's nothing I can do about Iranians. They have to get their own house in order. Like Rambam says about the Shechemites, they deserve death. Why they didn't get their own house in order? That's their problem. Every group is supposed to govern. What was that? Govern themselves. We just had a parish. Hold on 1 second. We're having technical difficulties here in the basement. It's still online, but Atasi Tadze? Okay. Okay, Atem Yodima Bayavin. Okay. Sorry about that. Someone did something, and you understand? Does that make sense? The Iranians need to get their house in order, and they need to do things. Maybe they shouldn't be killing people. Maybe they should. Look, it's okay. If you have a country where they impose a death penalty on thieves and idolaters, it's actually a good thing. They'll keep. That's what the
Yeah,
Torah
but
prescribes.
they're imposing death penalty on people
On
protesting.
political dissonance, that's a problem. And they have, like I said, you have a government. You'll cry out to God eventually, saying, "Save us from our king." That's a problem. If you've given yourself an improper mode of government, you don't have the right people in charge. You're going to suffer, and the only recourse it will be is prayer. I think about what's the worst place on earth? North Korea.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So you hear about the terrible things. How could that happen? How could that happen? It means it's something wrong culturally. And South Korea is only South Korea only because American intervention, right? The Americans saved that country. But if what if there hadn't been no America? It would just be Korea. Korea would be Korea, and that's a terrible place. So they have a problem. And there's something else we should say. These regimes are always held up by what? It's not just the one guy on top. He has underlings who are helping him. One of the most important things is the police types, the type of people who become police who are saying, "I'm just following orders."
Doing my job.
Any regime needs the type of people who are so sheepish, as we could say. They're so sheepish that they're enforcing. They could be cruel and be like, "Well, that's the rules." Why'd you hit me over the head? Because the rules say I have to hit you over the head. I'm just following orders. The Jewish people are not going to produce a regime like that because we're too stubborn and we're too free thinking, thank God, and we're too smart to do this. I've met some people like that. I know people who are policemen or auxiliary police, and sometimes they have this thing where they go blank and they do something and you ask them, "Why did you do that? Didn't you know that was wrong?" They're like, I was just doing as I was told. I'm like, but you should have a conscience. You went to yeshiva in order to, at least you were taught a little bit of Talmud to know if you're not to listen to certain things. You say, "Yeah, but my job is to listen. I'm a soldier. I'm a policeman." So perhaps you should have looked into this before you took that job.
Right.
No one told you to volunteer for this if you weren't able to already be properly discerning of when you were being told to do this. And you have to also, whatever. The regime's always propped up enough because you need enough people who are going along with it.
And in America,
Hitler's willing executioners.
It's worse in America with the cops because a lot of the cops will say that. They'll say, "Oh, I was just following orders and doing my job." But the law in America says that's at the discretion.
Many states.
Yeah, the United States. It's at the discretion.
No, I'm saying it might vary from state to state or municipality.
No. The law is it's at the discretion of the officer. If he catches you speeding,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have to write you a ticket.
What, he could just beat you?
No, that's what I'm saying. So when they go and they crack these guys over the head or doing whatever they're doing, they don't have to do that. It's at their discretion. They have discretion.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about here. Maybe they don't have discretion here, but in America they do have discretion.
Good. So it's good that they have some discretion.
But they don't use it.
Okay.
They always say
it's a very big problem. I think, once again, if I could quote Dr. Peterson, because I've learned a lot about human psychology from him. He said that IQs, he administers IQ tests because he wanted to talk about intelligence. He says the people with the highest IQs are the type of people he knew in a university, physics and mathematics professors. Without fail, always the guys with the highest IQs, they do that. And the slightly lower IQs are also professors of other hard sciences and law and things like that. It says, and psychologists, they're lower on the IQ scale. And he says you get people who are even lower than that, and there's a certain lowness around average. That's people who are good at being cops.
Yeah.
The really smart people don't go into police force. You have to have a certain level of, can I say, stupidity?
Yeah.
And then people below that, he made a joke, and then people below that are like, women's studies professors. Okay. Jews are different, by the way. On average, Jews are more intelligent because we study these things. He didn't study Talmud scholars. I would love to hear if he administered IQ tests to, let's say, the type of people we know, real heavyweight Jewish scholars. He would first use the credit distribution to find out who the real Jewish scholars are and administer tests to them and find out that, lo and behold, there's a reason why Jews who leave the base medrash end up becoming really smart in other fields.
What do you think Rav's IQ is?
Who?
Rav.
Quite high. You could tell just by listening to him. I spoke about this a few weeks ago. I said when I sat talking to Dr. England, Rabbi Bar-Hayim, and Rabbi Siskind, I felt like the stupid guy in the room. Yeah, they're all very smart. You could tell it.
Me and Shmuel estimate 140 to 160.
And because you
We're
administer
estimating,
IQ
we're
tests.
just guessing.
Okay, you should just know they say Netanyahu has a very high IQ. Jews produce physics professors and mathematics professors very easily. Okay, why? Because we have it. Back to the halacha. Sorry, Yaakov, that we did this digression. This indiscretion led to a digression. So let's try to stay focused a little bit more, especially for the benefit of the new guy. So it says here, Shnei Shutafin Shechalku, Zelakach Asara Tlaim. You have two partners in crime here. What do they have? They're going to divide the property. This one has 10 lambs, Zelakach Tisha v'Chelev. And this one took 9 lambs and the dog. 19 lambs and a dog. So I'll take 9 lambs and a dog, and you take 10 of the sheep, 10 lambs. Well, 10 of the sheep. The lambs are of the sheep. Sheima Kelev Mutarim. The 9 that were taken with the dog, okay, my 9 and my dog. So those 9 sheep can be korbanot. Aval hasarasha kenegdo, the 10 sheep that you took. Im yesh echad mehem domo kidmei akelev. If there's one of those sheep is in value, its monetary value is the same as that of the kelev, or about the dog, that is, all yeteral demei akelev, or even more worth more than the dog, which is hopefully likely. Motzio min asara keneged akelev yeh michiro. We should say that this one sheep is opposite the dog. 9 sheep, 9 sheep. 1 sheep, 1 dog. So that sheep is instead of the dog. That's the one that's forbidden. Usharan mutar, and the other 9 sheep you got are not considered exchanged for the dog. If each one of them is less in value than the actual dog, so all 10 sheep now are considered traded for the dog, and they're all forbidden. Nishtana mechir. Ooh, this is a good one. This involves ribbis questions usually. If the prices change, right? The market prices change. So here it says the price of the dog changes. Gon shechlif kelev bechitim v'nasu solet. Where's the mutar? The mechir, right? In this case, like we said, the prostitute, she takes the wheat and she grinds it into solet. Can that be korban? We said yes. It's changed. So in this case, nishtana mechir doesn't mean that the prices, the values go up on the market. It means that the thing that he paid for the dog is now not there anymore. He slaughters the goat, and it's meat. Okay, so he could donate the meat to the temple for its value. The temple doesn't buy meat. The temple would buy. If the temple got meat, someone donates the salami to the temple people would probably sell the salami and use that money for temple purposes. So this is mutar. Ethnan kelev umchir zonah. Let's say you have an ethnan kelev umchir zonah, the hire of a dog and the price of a prostitute. What is it? Ethnan kelev. I hate to read what it says, so I want to tell you. So I'll read what it says here. Hanothein tashlum to murat hazachut livol kalba. Okay, a person pays for the services of a she dog. Okay, yeah, pretty sinister. Or mechir zonah, he is selling someone who's technically a prostitute. That means a shifcha. Okay, yeah. Any shifcha kananis has the status of a zonah halachically. So you sell a shifcha kananis for, let's say, a sheep. Okay, you're a shifcha kananis for a sheep. So that's a mechir zonah mutarim. So these are technically could be used for temple purposes. Yes, the fact is that the Gemara discussed these things because people used to do this. They're miyuta de miyuta, but it happens. There are women who were sold on the slave market. If you have a shifcha kananis sold on the slave market and she's sold for an animal, so that animal is not considered an mechir kelev or an esnan zona. It's a mechir zona because it says ethnan zona on mechir kelev. That's what the pasuk says. It has to be the hire of a harlot or the price of a dog, but not the other way around. Mutarim levedek abayith. Remember, these are also permissible to vedek abayith, sharein and mishtanim. If you have ethnan zona mechir kelev, let's say a woman, you did pay the prostitute, so she could take that money and give it to the vedek abayis. That means the general upkeep of the temple fund, because they're already different. Aval gufan shel ethnan, the actual ethnan, the actual animal he gave the prostitute. Lo yeser rikuyim levayith. If he gave her money, let's say gold, they shouldn't use it as rikuyim. That means the plates to make the temple nice and gold. What are the rikuyim? Remember? Anybody remember this? It was mentioned twice. Rambam says at the beginning, the best way to build a temple is if you could coat the entire thing with gold inside and outside, then that's a mitzvah to do. And when did they actually do this? Well, the first temple was made out of gold. It was golden boards. It was called the Mishkan. So it was boards that were wood, basically plated in gold on both inside and out. So if you're standing outside the Mishkan or inside the Mishkan, it looks all gold. And the first temple also, its Holy of Holies and the Holy was coated in gold by Solomon. The outside wasn't made out of gold, but they said that was an ideal. And in Second Temple times, at least the Herod thought, okay, we got to make this whole thing out of gold, right? And the sages liked what he did so much with the marble on the outside. They said, no, just leave it as it is. It looks even better than gold. But they had a running fund called the Kaporet Fund. What's the Kaporet? That was the golden lid of the Ark of the Covenant, right? So the place where the Ark of the Covenant stood was called the Beit HaKaporet, the area of the Kaporet, the place of the Kaporet, the mercy seat, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. So Kaporet became synonymous with the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies. So there was a running fund mentioned in Shkolim at the end of the Masechta that they always had people donate gold to make gold plates to plate the entire Holy of Holies with gold. They never finished this goal, but it was something they did. Whenever they had enough gold, they would make another plate to add to the Holy of Holies so that it would be covered in gold. And that was something they kept doing in the Second Temple time. So what happened to all that gold? Presumably the Romans took it when they sacked the temple. Could Achihud, can you close the door? People forget it. Just that's what brings in all the cold here. Okay. La Vieta Rikuim. So it says Shenamar al Neder. The pasuk teaches that technically the prostitute could donate gold to the temple, but they should not use this gold to plate the Holy of Holies. And we'll see. That's why it's good that the Dome of the Rock is there with all that gold up there, right? So just waiting for the taking. Okay, let's go into the fifth parak. Well,
jumped on the like this. We get the helicopter and take the dome, cash in on it.
No, you can't just lift it off. You know how much the Dome of the Rock weighs? The dome part, the gold. Oh no, gold's pretty heavy stuff. Remember?
I thought it was just gold plated, or is it solid?
Even if it's gold plating, okay, it's not like gold leaf, like just little flat flakes of it. It's real pieces of gold. It has to be a certain thickness, and it still covers a wide area. It's a lot of gold. Let's see, what's Seor and Davash? Seor is sourdough. Why? Because they used to not have instant yeast in this, like you buy in the stores. You have to have a sourdough going, and you put a little of that into the dough right away, and that gets it going. Why? You and I have read Hilchot Pesach, and we see that you know what happens. You mix flour and water, and it starts to rise. An hour later, it should have risen significantly, right? It barely rises, by the way. You have to add a little sourdough if you want it to leaven quickly enough to eat bread today, right? So that's what Seor is. Seor is sourdough, and I think the word sour even comes from the word Seor, etymologically. That's what I've heard. Devash means, well, you don't think it's true? Okay, you're calling me? Okay, fine. Yaakov's going to call me on that one. Devash normally means what? In the Bible, land flowing of milk and honey. What's the milk referred to? It's not cow milk, it's goat's milk. And honey is date honey. But there are some halachas where honey actually means bee honey. And we had a contest looking in the Torah. There's actually which references in Torah are to date honey and which references are to bee honey. Okay? So it's a good question. Euros Devash, even when it says that Jonathan found honey in the forest, we talked about this a few months ago. Was it talking about bee honey or date honey? Good question. Or some people say that no, it was sugar cane. He actually found some sugar cane. Yeah. It doesn't make what? I know it drips a sap that's very honey-like. Basically, there are some places in rabbinic literature at least, honey is any sappy sweet stuff that comes out of plants. Okay. What do you got there? Is it correct?
No, it's the word sourdough is entirely indigenous.
It's in German, sour. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have to. It looks the same. It's sour and sour, especially because the Yekis, people who live in Germany, classically, they pronounce the cholim like how? Ow. Yeah, at least before the war. Real Yekis pronounce the cholim like an ow. Okay? Owlum. That's the word for the world. They would say owlum. Yeah, they'd say it. I remember we had a neighbor who was, she was from those places, and they said like really like ow. Professor Shapiro brought examples of transliterations. They used to transliterate as AU. Okay. Yeah. Hold on one second. Well, yeah, the whole, but it's both labial. The point is that it ends with that labial sound. In German, people think that German has no consonantal W sound. It does when you have the ow followed by another vowel, like sour. Okay, there's a German last name Bauer. That's the one time Germans could say "wo." Okay, if they connect it to ow. Okay. Sor dvash asurin legabe mizbeach. So this dvash, I think, is referring to date honey. Okay, it's not talking about bee honey. It's talking about date honey. And it doesn't matter how much. So I'll read you the notes here because the notes are good. It doesn't matter. Just a mashahu prohibits the sacrifice if you put a little date honey. Mashma shadvash murkan hu dvash tamarim. We're going to read here. It seems clear from the Rambam that this is referring to date honey, which they sell in stores nowadays. Watch out. You go shopping, you guys should know. Sometimes it's 100% Ceylon, date honey. That's the Arabic word for it. And sometimes it's 50% Ceylon and then 50% brown sugar water. Okay, so watch out. That's why would they do such a thing? To make more money. If they, the brown sugar water is cheaper than the actual pure date honey, so they make more, more profit off of you. It's like my wife was disappointed. This is real grape juice. This is 100% grape juice. Good. And there's a similar bottle they sell at the Makol. It's another liter bottle. My neighbor bought this. It says Tirosh Avim, also grape juice and all that. It then says 70% grape juice. The other 30% is sugar water. Yeah. And that. Okay, 30% more profits. No, that's not how it works. But that much more money for them. This was a grape juice bottle. I filled it with water. Yeah, it's pretty weak grape juice, huh? You want some grape juice? We have in the kitchen. Okay, and they continue here. According to Rashi and Rashbam and Tosfos, any fruit sweetness, if you derive, let's say you make grape jelly out of this also, or apples, whatever it is, that's called dvash. According to Sefer Chinuch, Gam dvash devorim nechshav dvash. Bee honey also, that's included in this prohibition. Some wrote that according to the Rambam, anything that is sweet and even just sugar that you get from, let's say, sugar cane would be considered dvash. That's what Rav Kapach claims. Yeah, you don't believe me? Okay. Yeah. So they brought every single possible opinion down here. Generally speaking, it seems to be date honey. We'll work with the Rambam. Hold on one second. Someone's joining us. Yeah. Next, as it says, ki chol seor v'chol davash lo taktiru. Okay. It says don't burn on the altar any seor any davash. Ve'eno chayav eli miktiran ima korban. And he's only chayav if he burned it with the korban, or l'shem korban, or he brought it as a sacrifice. If he just put it on the altar, not thinking about it, so he's not chayav for it. I guess it's a shkaga. We didn't think it was sacrifice. He burned it there for whatever reason. I don't know why. It doesn't matter if he burned them on their own or a combination of something else with them. He is to be lashed for everyone on its own. That means davash, seor, both of them. So two sets of lashings. If he combines the two, davash and honey together, honey and sourdough together, he's only to be lashed once. Because they were put together in one avera. So now he gets one lashing. But if he brought, let's say, leavened bread with, and then he brought some honey, so he get lashed twice. Okay. Any bit of sourdough or date honey falls into the incense. The incense is now disqualified. And if he then took this incense, this disqualified incense, and burned it in the heichal, that's the actual edifice of the temple where the golden altar was, also he is to be lashed. As we said before, unlike a few pictures, I remember seeing one picture. It shows the Kohen Gadol there burning incense on the altar. So it shows a man of reasonable height. So it looks as high as, let's say, this Torah reading table. Nice height for a man. But as we saw, the golden altar was actually quite low. Well, how tall is it? Like a 2 amas tall or something like that? It's actually quite low. It looked like it was like the height of a coffee table. Yeah. You saw that? In depictions, a golden altar is always shown much taller than it actually was. It's actually quite a short thing. What does it mean? Aktar is only considered the threshold of prohibition, and punishment is what? A kazayas. If he did less than a kazayas, he burned less than a kazayas of this disqualified Torahs, then he is not to be lashed. If he brings the seor dvash up onto the altar alone, he is not to be lashed. They shall not go up on the altar as a satisfying aroma to God. As a satisfying aroma, that's a sacrifice, you can't bring it up. But you could bring it as what? As just burning material. So what does it mean? Hold on one second. No, I read this wrong. Okay. What is this here over here? I think this is wrong here. I read it. I have it correct in my book. Here it says. Here. They're missing something here. It's supposed to say shame hates him. I'll read you what Bechol Mamre has, and correct me. Gimel starts with Gimel in your additions. Or dvash b'fnei atzman lamizbeach patur. He left out the important words here. L'shem eitzim. L'shem eitzim. You have the words l'shem eitzim there. That was the whole point of this thing. Because otherwise this halacha is the same as the other ones. Means, what does l'shem eitzim mean? He brought up as firewood. He brings up, they're low on wood today. So what are they going to bring? Sourdough. Dry sourdough. It's been dehydrated. So now we could use it as kindling. That's why he's bringing this big chunk of sourdough. Or all he has is date honey to use as fuel. Technically speaking, you could wrap it up in, let's say, paper-like things, or you soak wood in the date honey. It'll burn more, right? That's theoretically possible. You put oil on wood, the wood gives more fuel, right? So if you did this, l'shem eitzim as firewood. So there it is. I can't believe I read it wrong. I didn't read it in my book. That's what we're talking about in this halacha. Okay. Aval atal maleh l'shem eitzim. Okay. You could bring it up as firewood, but here it says he's putter. If you use them as firewood, so he's putter on the altar. The previous halacha says if he just burned any of them on the altar as sacrifice, he has to be lashed. If he was using them as firewood, so he is exempt from punishment. Wait a minute. Does that mean a person has a choice of firewood? We're going to see. We're going to get to this. Hold that question. So the big thing at the end of the parak, what firewood is to be used on the altar, and to what extent can people just bring firewood? Because the implication is that a person can just bring firewood to the altar, but we're saying that you can't do that. There's some places where it seems to imply yes, and some places imply no. So we'll see the resolution.
Well, I don't think that you can bring any type of pine wood up there because pine wood has sap in it and it'll just like clog up and make everything nasty.
Well, they didn't really have pine wood. They didn't use pine wood back then. We're going to see that they had certain types. They had types of wood that they like to use, and types of wood that they didn't. There's specific kinds. Also, I have a question: can they use gas? Because we're going to see it's not exactly lav dafka wood. Because you're supposed to use wood. It says if you use this as wood. What do you mean? This is dough and this is date honey.
No, you can't use gas because Rav Cook says that you can't use gas for the menorah because they didn't have gas back then to burn. So they didn't have gas back then to burn, so you can't use gas now.
Okay, well that's talking about menorah, which is specifically supposed to be oil and for lighting. Here it says we already said instead of wood, you just use some other vegetable product, dough or honey. They're also a type of vegetation.
Don't grow gas, man.
Okay, so I'm saying that maybe some fossil fuel, peat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. No, we're going to see. We have what to see about this. It says l'shem eitzim.
So you're saying that they couldn't use coal, but
They didn't have coal back in the day. Coal was something that the Chinese. Hold on. Yeah, at the ground. In our ancestors here in Israel did not know the Chinese were digging up coal yet, and even then the Chinese used it on a very limited basis. Coal became as a major fuel with the industrial revolution.
Could they use tar?
So we talked about neft. Like raw petroleum does come to the surface, and Chazal had that, and that was basically said they knew that was flammable, and you could light candles with it. So they said you can't use it for Shabbos candles because it stinks.
That's probably why they couldn't use
it's unrefined. So you couldn't bring that stuff. They wouldn't bring raw petroleum, unrefined petroleum.
But it's not a vegetable product.
Yeah, it's not a vegetable. It comes right out of the ground.
There's not. Wait. You're telling me that there's like there's a gas that comes up out of the water, like on its own?
No, I'm saying that we now know how to refine natural gas. We know how to derive it.
Right.
Peat, by the way, you know what peat is,
That's
right?
what he was saying. Back then they didn't have that. They didn't have like refined.
I know they didn't have it.
They're not
So
looking for refined. They're not looking for refined.
okay, I'm just trying to say that theoretically speaking, you already see from this halach the implication was that dough that's not sourdough can be used as firewood on the altar. What makes this thing disqualified is that the pasuk says don't use seor. But if he brought it up with Shem Eitzim, just to be used as firewood, so he's to not be punished because he's not to be punished for bringing sourdough or date honey. Why? Because he's using it as firewood. Mashma that the firewood could be other things than just pure wood,
Really?
maybe leaves, okay, and other things. Peat. What is peat? We'll talk about this more when I get to the halacha. What is peat? You guys know what peat is?
It's like bog plants.
Yeah, no, it's bog matter, like all the rotten plants that are in there and they get stuck in the mud there, and it creates this. It's like the precursor to coal, and you can still detect that there's still vegetable, like decayed vegetable matter in there. Peat, if you look on the maps, only occurs in like real northern regions, like Scotland, Siberia, places like that have peat. Peat bogs don't exist here in the land of Israel. We don't have anything close to that, but the people who live up in, let's say, Scotland and Siberia and Scandinavia, they could go to the peat bog and they cut out a chunk of this muddy, earthy stuff, and they use that as a very rich fuel. Like I said, it's a precursor of coal. So people have been using that for hundreds of years. but not biblical and Mishnaic times. So Chazal didn't have such a thing, but can you theoretically use it? I guess, it's made of that, but it doesn't really have animals in it. It doesn't have bugs and worms. It's basically sterile. It's also antimicrobial, ironically. So coal is basically what that is, but it's a much more process. It's been under the ground much longer, so it's been, all that time and pressure turning into a fossil fuel. And basically, coal is not something that mankind used until very late in history. Okay, it's not something you use to burn in your house, by the way. You could burn in your fireplace wood, even then it makes smoke, and it's not the best thing to have in the house. But if you were burning coal in your fireplace, you couldn't live in that house. You'd blacken yourself way too much. In this case, he burns something on the altar. It shouldn't have davash and seor. Let's say you mixed in, I don't know, you put davash on the entrails of the korban, right? Or you put the seor into the komets of the mincha. Komets is the part that the kohen grabs like this and burns with the frankincense. So he puts some of that in there, some of the sourdough into that, or some of the honey into that. Korban, because he put it with the korban, loke is to be lashed. Ketzat. A person took some of the meat of the chatas, the sin offering or the guilt offering. Some of the meat of the lesser holy animals, like a shlomin. Sharim achot is let's say the part of the menachos that the kohanim are going to eat. Omi mosar omer, the extra parts of the korban omer. Omi chatas ha'ov. Chatas ha'ov is eaten by the kohanim. It's a bird sacrifice. They just put the blood on the altar, and the rest of the bird is eaten by the kohanim. Oh, milechem apanim ushtei lechem, or some of the lechem apanim, or the two breads that are eaten on Shavuot. The lechem apanim normally isn't burned on the Mizbeach. It's eaten by, we said, half is given to the Kohen Gadol, and the other half is given to the other Kohanim on duty. Omi log shemen shel mitzorah, or from this log of shemen, that's like his jar of oil that the mitzorah brings as part of his purification ritual. Hamalek kazait me'echad me'elu b'chametz o b'dvash. Person burns just a little bit of this, just an olive's worth, on the altar with a little bit of chametz. Now it says chametz. You have seor or the word chametz there? Why does he mention chametz? Because once you put the seor into the mincha, it turns into chametz. It's not seor anymore, so now it's chametz or with honey. Bein la mizbeach, bein la keves. In this case, it's a kevesh with a shin, not a sin. With the sin, it's a sheep. With a shin, it's the ramp of the altar. Lokeh, he used to be lashed. Even though some of these things aren't even meant to be burned, these are meant to be eaten. These are all parts that are meant to be eaten. Because these are considered, they're called korban. The meat that you eat, the sacrificial meat you eat, is still a korban. He has to be lashed for burning these on the altar with the seor davash. Shneimar korban reishith takrivu tham lashem. You can. It says with regards to davash that you can make them a korban reishith, but they cannot be put on the altar. When do you bring davash as a korban? You're supposed to bring dates. You have dates in your crop, so you have to give some of that as bikurim. Bikurim are brought to the temple courtyard in a basket. Let's say all you have is dates. You don't have grapes and pomegranates, so you're going to bring a basket full of honey exuding dates to the kohen. He's going to take, here's bikurim. That's called a korban. It's korban reishith. Reishith bikurei ad matacha. That's what it's talking about here. See, bikurim occur in how many books of the Bible? They're in Shemos, they're in Vayikra, and they're in Devarim, right? I think, not mistaken. They're in Shemos. It says reishith bikurei ad matacha twice in Shemos, and then it says here bikurim are mentioned here in the Vayikra 2, and then it says the mitzvah of bikurim in on Shavuos later in Vayikra, and then Devarim talks about mikra bikurim. So bikurim are mentioned a few times in the Torah. So it says you're supposed to bring bikurim. Dates become as bikurim, but then the kohen walks out of the temple courtyard and eats the dates like truma at home, but it's still considered a korban. So these things are korbanot, but they're not the type that are offered on the mizbeach, but they're still called korban. So if you mix some date honey into, or other types of honey according to these other mefarshim, you mix it into a part of the sacrifice that's meant to be consumed and not burned, still get lashed if it ended up on the mizbeach. Let's continue. You're not allowed to burn on the altar any of these things that aren't fit to be burned. the meat of these sacrifices that's supposed to be eaten is not supposed to be burned on the altar. If there's something that some of it was supposed to be burned and the rest was supposed to be kept for something else, it is prohibited to then burn it. You can't say, well, I have a sin offering. Part of the sin offering is burned on the altar. Part is given to the Kohanim to eat. And a Shlomim, some is burned on the altar, and some is given to the Kohanim, and some is given to the owners to eat. I can't say, you know what? I voluntarily will give some of the meat I'm supposed to eat also to be burned on the Mizbeach. Make it more of a burnt offering. I want to give more to the Mizbeach. Kamash Balon, that it's forbidden. Okay? You can't give more of your Shlomim to the Mizbeach. Very interesting halacha. I understand. I would think that's there's a Rivit here. Let's read the Rivit here. There's a here. He says here that when Rambam said that there's more prohibitions here, get lashed once or get lashed twice, he says, Amar Avraham, Basfarim Shalanu, Rava Mechayiv Shtaim Va'arba. Rava would say, no, you're either liable twice or four times. 2 sets of lashes or 4 sets of lashes. Va'abaye Poter Mishum Lav Shabichlalo. And Abaye would punish them because the Lav Shabichlalo, we're going to get into Chicago, they're different. What? There's actual milk? We're going to do it. Yellow corn, sunflower, whey. Yeah. Zemei chalav. Chalav mamash. Whey. Hamilah sham, whey, W-H-E-Y. Ze hamayim. כשמפרידים את החלב, יש את החלבונים והשומנים, ויש את זה, הנוזלים. לפני יש הימגון. זה עובר תהליך הימגון. אם לא מעבירים את זה בתהליך ההימגון, אתה יכול להפריד את המים מהחלב, וזה המים של החלב. You understood what that was? We'll close with this. Homogenized milk, right? Are anybody here drink raw milk, non-homogenized, non-pasteurized stuff? So it's a lot thicker, right? So we Ma? Chalav Nuchri. Let's before we answer this question.
It's from America.
OUD.
Okay.
OU זה טוב. כולנו אוכלים את זה, אבל זה ודאי. יש אוקיי. לא, הוא שואל אם זה חלב, is it חלב סתם או חלב ישרול? יש מצב שזה סתם חלב נוכרי. רוב הסיכויים שזה חלב נוכרי.
רוב הסיכויים?
זה בשבילנו לאכול.
תיאבון.
כן, כך.
לא, כל חלבי של אמריקה טוב.
Yeah, I know. Everybody eats OUD.
של אמריקה טוב.
Americans eat OUD, but here in Israel, a lot of them don't eat what's called OUD. Yeah. They like milk Israel.
No one's milking the pig. No one's milking pigs over there.
I know.
It's stupid.
I know. So we rely on a well-based heter. That makes a lot of sense. But they have a thing against this. What are we saying here? Let's just close with milk. They homogenize the milk in big machines, right? Turn into a colloidal suspension that it doesn't separate. The fat doesn't rise to the top. But there's a way that you could separate the liquid parts of the milk. Thank you. You can separate the liquid parts from the milk. That's called the whey. There's the curds and whey. Remember curds? Curds are the clumps of like the proteins and all that, right? Curds and whey. Little Miss Muffet. So the whey was just the lower liquidy parts of the milk. So these are god awful, by the way. There's a reason why we have them. These white cheddar flavored chips have whey in them. Yeah, sure. Come on.
I'll eat this straight potato chips.
It's not potato chips. I warn you, they're not that good. So these have actual whey in them. These have the liquid. Okay. These have the liquid from the milk in them. Is it chalav nachri? It's an OUD. They hold of the heter, just like your Hershey's, which is delicious, by the way. You know, real milk chocolate is chalav nachri, like a lot of other products. But we grew up that we eat these things because there's no chance that they have, you know, like you said, they're milking donkeys and pigs into here. We'll close that. Yeah.
I say that.
I know.
There's a rabbi in my community that said this, and I was like, dude, you're just a liar. No one's milking pigs.
Okay. So you can enjoy your chips.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to. So now they give it all to me, and we'll stop there. Any questions before we sign off? No. Okay. So we're gonna wish everybody good Shabbos, and may we see once again these halachas be put into practical use. Amen.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.